Running Light Ministry podcast is brought to you by listeners like you. You can support these podcasts by making a gift to the ministries at runninglight.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Running Light podcast with Katy Collins.
Hey.
And my name's Beau, and we call this the Better Pleasure podcast for many reasons, but one of them is found in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, which is really interesting because Running Light Ministries comes from Hebrews chapter 12.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, chapter 11 talks about God being better. You know, God was better for Moses than all the things of the palaces of Egypt kind of idea.
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of named it Better Pleasure. That's kind of our little tag, if you will.
Yeah.
You know,
it's good.
Yeah, it's a good one too.
It's a good one.
Because it's always the answer to everything.
It is.
Right?
Yep.
You
Better
know?
pleasure, better treasure. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm with Katy once again. This is probably podcast up in the 140s.
Jeesh.
Somewhere.
Rad.
So we're moving. We're almost in 150 already.
What are we going to do for 200?
You
do
know,
a celebration.
I don't know. We maybe should do a group podcast.
That'd be cool.
You know, you, Peter, me, Lisa, Bethany.
Yeah.
And just do like a giant group one.
Bicentennial?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that. You know, we all get rings.
Yeah.
But that would be cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah, but it's fun that now that me and you get to do some podcasting and kind of just kick around things.
Yeah.
One of the things that we kicked around, and me and Peter's been talking a lot about the trans culture a lot. We just got done a podcast yesterday. I haven't even posted it yet, but it's about, the influence of certain media, especially porn media, different branches and niches of porn that is very popularized in kids' cartoons.
Oh, gotcha.
And so, and how, you know, it can be kind of a way of educating. You know, you could see a woman that it looks beautiful and it has a phallic, you know, and you kind of go, whoa, but it becomes almost like normalized, you know, that kind of idea. But it's been fun talking about that topic. I always enjoy it. But you said something the other day, or you mentioned something the other day that was really interesting, and I think would probably freak out a lot of evangelicals in general. But I think it's good to like talk through it because I think there's something, there's a truth that we can get to. And we'll be blown away with, you know, as we kind of talk about it. So share like what you were mentioning to me.
Yeah, so kind of this question, like, is Jesus trans? Because he exists both as our bridegroom, Scripture teaches, but he also walked in our flesh to understand humanity. So I was like, let's talk about that. Let's look at that.
Yeah.
You know, he's both the husband and the wife. He's both the guy and the girl.
Yeah, and it's an interesting idea.
Kinda.
And I think, and I think in today's world, I think many people can go that direction. And I think probably like in what's called progressive Christianity, it probably moves in this kind of way, you know, where there's like, hey, you know, there's a passage about Jesus being the bridegroom, and, you know, but there also is passages about God, you know, or that, you know, he took a form of a flesh, so he's like, you know, his bride as well, you know, kind of idea. And then there's talks about God being, you know, a woman who cares for the children, and then there's talks about God being like a father, and there's this kind of nurturing back and forth. Is God trans?
Right.
You know, and I've heard that kind of idea. I think I've read it in an article at one point.
Sure.
You know, kind of thing. You know, and to me, like, it's always not good to like use modern vernacular,
Right.
To describe something that the Bible just doesn't say.
Right.
I think that's first like point,
Yeah.
if you will, is like to say something's trans in the same way
Yeah.
as the
We
culture.
define it now. Yeah, right.
Don't you think that would be a little weird?
Absolutely. I think we just, have to be careful with definitions and what we mean and what original context or content or whatever meant. And and instead looking at, how do we then see those characteristics of God? You know, Like, does he have an identity and then moves in these ways and shows himself in these ways or relates to us in these ways, but they're not the core identity type,
Yeah. Yeah, because the Bible is always depicting the deity in human terms.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. The arm of the Lord. Mm-hmm. Right? He hides his face. Mm-hmm. And you could take that literally. Sure. Like, oh, God's got a face.
And an arm.
God's got an arm,
Yeah.
But yeah, Jesus says the Lord is spirit, right? God is spirit. And so we know that God is not some 900-pound human being somewhere.
Right. And when Scripture talks about him being like a mother hen, he's not literally a chicken.
Right.
Right.
And that's good.
And so we use those, Bible study rules, for sure.
Yeah, which is called hermeneutics.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just how we study the Scriptures. We're using a human vernacular to describe someone who's not human. And but in order to communicate it properly to people, we have to use human kind of language.
Yeah.
And that's all we know as humans.
Sure.
So it's like that's how we're describing it.
Yeah. I think of, isn't it eisegesis and exegesis? Aren't those other two cool words? That one of them means you take from exegesis.
Yeah.
And eisegesis you put in.
That's right.
So that would be kind of that idea of let's not eisegesis this with maybe a concept like trans or a word from our culture that we're going to impose in.
Right.
Would that be right? Kind of how you think about that?
Yes.
Okay.
So, like, if you don't want to put your own kind of world into the biblical text, right?
Yeah.
Or else you're gonna get, that's where you start coming up with all kinds of interesting things. Where we have to look at the who, what, where, when, why in the context of what's being said, and then look at that first. We don't want to just pull something out and go, hey, let me now use it the way I use it in today's kind of way.
Yeah.
So eisegesis, exegesis is important rules to studying the Bible, to preaching and to teaching and all that. So I would say, using the term trans is always a real rough one because it carries with it a real interesting idea today.
Yeah, for sure.
Something that the Bible doesn't know of. Like, for instance, like in trans language, the idea of gender being a cultural, if you will, idea. Yeah. And it's not a part of biology. Right. It is just simply something that has been put on you by culture. So when someone says my gender, I'm this gender, that's something that, like, what is masculine, what is feminine, this has been put on you by your culture. And the Bible doesn't share that idea. Yeah. When it comes to the root of the word gender, gene, it's the idea of biology. Right. Yeah. And so it's the idea of, your genetics. Right. Who you are, your makeup. DNA. Yeah. And even studying the word, it comes from, it's the word gonad. Okay. It's been used for gender. Huh. Or we get gender from the root that is in the word gonad as well. So if someone's gonads is a male, right. That's usually, I remember as a kid, you got kicked in the gonads. Right, yeah, totally. It's a derogatory term, man. You're, whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so so there's certain things that we say today that just aren't true in biblical worldview. Right. Yeah. And that's the tension, obviously. For sure. What else I was thinking too is like Jesus is the eternal Son of God. Right? And so he always remains the Son of God. He took a body and he takes that body into heaven in the transfiguration. Yeah. And he forevermore has that body. Right. So the eternal Son takes on a body. Right. Takes that body into heaven. And I guess my point is that he's always been the eternal Son. It's not like Jesus transitioned. Right. Right. And I think that's somehow gets into people's minds a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that this, yes, and so we got to think about what, biblical worldview, and that he always was and always is, and there's this eternal nature of God that's unchanging. And so if he's unchanging, I mean, even right in that, there's a always was and always will be nature. Yeah,
there's not a fluidity to God.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so it's steadfast, it's the string is always there,
Yeah.
But I think what draws beauty in this to me is he chose to put on our flesh,
Yeah.
And he chose to know his bride.
Yeah. Which we could say, like, Jesus transitioned.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that's still a little, maybe a hot
button word, right?
Right? Yeah. Like, what? But in a sense, he, but that there is a truth in the idea that Jesus took on that body.
Yeah.
Philippians chapter 2, right? He humbled himself to the point of being like a man, right? Taking on a body.
Right.
And in that sense, transitioned from dwelling with the Father,
right?
Who Jesus longed to be with the Father, right?
Yeah.
And said, man, I can't wait to get back and hang out with my dad, But so in that sense, I could see the word transition being used. He transitioned from one place to another.
Sure. Yeah.
But we have to be careful, right? That eternal, the deity. It's not like he transitioned in deity.
Right. Like his essential nature did not change.
Right.
Never will. Never has.
Right.
But he added to it humanity.
Right.
Yeah. Which blows our brains. We can't fully understand. But he remained. There's an essence that never shifted. But then, so maybe it's almost even like, and I know it's all just weird, but like drag, where you put on, like that internal thing doesn't change, but you're putting on. But it's just, I don't know. My heart in thinking through this was to encourage, like, if you're in that spot of who am I, which am I, what am I, where am I,
But what's interesting is you use the term drag, but it's I know people are like, what? These kind of terms, but it's neat to think about this in these ways.
Yeah.
Because you kind of can debunk things that way too.
Sure.
It's like, when I grew up going to Santa Monica for the Rocky Horror Picture Show on Saturday night.
Sure.
Saturday in Santa Monica, I always had a big one. And one of the guitar players that studied music with me in university played the transsexual transvestite.
Yeah.
In the play, if you know anything about Rocky Horror, they do a play during the movie.
Okay.
And so the college students there's like a club, and they would pick who's going to be who, and it's like a really rip-roaring time, But, he would play that, but he would put it on and he would take it off.
Yeah.
He would put it on, the outfit, and he would take it off, And in that sense, there is no drag with God, right? God is not, God the Son does not put on the body and then take off the body.
Right.
No, it becomes part of his nature.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? So it's like, and this is why it's neat, I think, using these terms. And I know it freaks some people out a little bit, but this is why. It's because C.S. Lewis talked about that we all are longing for something, in our heart.
For sure.
And, we live in a shadowlands. And, and it's so true that even all these behaviors that we find to be maybe radical, people are pointing to something. People are longing for something.
Absolutely.
I want to be something. I want to be something. And it's, and then I got to take it off. And then I want to be something. And, when people that are going through sexual transition, they're wanting to be something.
Sure. They want to find that essence.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Who am I?
Yeah.
What am I? And the neat thing about God is God is complete in his nature. And when he adds to it a human body, it's not that he's trying to find himself.
Right.
Or find his true identity. Instead, it's an act of love,
Right.
of actually drawing close
Yes.
to his creation.
I think that's the defining departure, is it's not self-focused. It's relationship focused.
Yeah.
So he's always been, that essence isn't changing, but in order to draw near to his beloved, he'll put on her skin. He'll know what it's like to be her. And then he'll forever be wed to that now.
Yeah.
It's just relational at its core.
Yeah.
Not like, who am I and what do I need to do to, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's selfless.
Yeah.
It's reconciliatory, I guess you could say, right? So, that's another neat point, is that God, in his essence, is complete.
Yeah.
He has no need. He is sovereign. He has
Right.
no need of any kind of alteration to himself. The act of the Son taking a body is the incredible example that God gives to his creation of his love. To literally take that body and sacrifice, which offering means to draw near. Interesting in Hebrew, so he draws near with laying down his body for
Right.
them, living a righteous life.
Yeah.
And we haven't even got to the Holy Spirit who lives
Right.
in us.
Right.
Right.
And now I just want to go off on this whole husband laying down his life, entering his wife, knowing her, you know. I mean, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
But the husband never changes his identity. He just becomes one flesh. I mean, it's just, it's
in a
incredible.
sense, a husband finds his femininity
Yep.
in his wife.
Right.
And a wife finds her masculinity, right?
Right.
In her husband.
Right.
And it's like, me as a husband, I can get kind of jaded with maybe one side of that, I can maybe even go masculine, or become very feminine. And that kind of idea, and even like assume a feminine role, like my wife, or my wife can assume a masculine role, and that kind of idea.
Yeah.
But it's neat that in Christian marriage, in the way God has laid it out, that we get to share in these kind of attributes
Right.
to who we are
Yeah.
with one another.
Right. You bring each essence to the thing, but then you become one.
Yeah.
Just as Christ brought his essence, but then put on ours, and forever is wed now in that unified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is radical.
It's so radical. It's great.
Yeah. And Jesus says, hey, Father, may they become one with me as I
Right.
am one with you.
Right.
You
There's all this two becoming one,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that, that someone in this space of transition or curiosity or whatever would know, like, this is not outside of what God wants to talk about, can handle, also that where this can all just be really freaky language maybe for some evangelicals, but like,
Yeah, but we have to have we have to have a place where we can start talking about these
Right.
things, and whether you like it or not, things are the way they are in the world, and this is how it's always been. It's like, I know people kind of freak now, and technology certainly has moved us forward in some of the ramifications of our thinking. So, like, for instance, if you want to be a woman and you're a male, biological male, technology has made it possible for you to get some surgeries so you
Right.
can cosmetically look the part.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
kind of idea. But the idea of someone wanting to be something different than they are
Yeah.
this is what fictional books have been on forever.
Yeah.
Greek mythology. This is all wrapped up into all that.
But I even say, all the way back to Genesis 3.
Yeah.
Satan wanted Eve to be like God. That desire to be something other than you are.
Yeah, you can be.
You can be
Yeah.
something other than you are.
Which is such a trippy
Yeah.
thing. It's so early on in the Bible.
Right there.
And you know what's weird is like, Answers in Genesis takes a lot of heat, that ministry, Answers in Genesis.
Sure.
But because they always say back to Genesis. But isn't it so true?
Everything starts there, though. I mean, it's the book of starting, you know?
And it's funny. It's, I always encourage people in my devotions that I do online is just to read through the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I try to show them through my devotions just how I go through it. But there's so much that can be answered there. Isn't that weird? Eve, at the very beginning of the Bible, I mean, like page 3, like you said. Mm-hmm. Isn't that so weird?
Yeah.
Just so early on.
Yeah.
And there's that idea of, like, you can be.
You can be, fill in the blank. Yeah.
Yeah, and you go, man, you know what? Gosh, yeah, maybe I can't be this. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should be this. Mm-hmm. Maybe that'll make me more fulfilled, more better.
Right.
Or more complete, or more, and it's funny, we're all emitting something.
Oh yeah.
And like what, whether you're going through transition or you're emitting something by what you're affirming, right? Meaning what you're affirming is this idea of I want to be like this. Mm-hmm. But that's obviously a confession too of that something's off.
Right. Something's not quite enough.
Yeah, something's not quite enough.
Yeah, and that's what she was faced with, was what God had given and asked of her, was that enough?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it wasn't, and that fruit was all she could see, you know, and it looked good.
Right.
And so maybe he is withholding. Maybe there is something more, you know, and then doubt and, creeps in and
yes. Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading about a lady who some of her writing is like the prototype writing. It's like the of the queer movement in the United States.
Yeah.
And I'll have to send you you it and let you read it. Me and Peter are kind of pouring through it.
Yeah.
But she's a Jewish woman. She's received many accolades for her activism in this area, all the way from the 70s on, and she ended up moving to San Francisco and really laying down roots. She's very much part of BDSM, leather community, pro-sex, feminist, but it just I was looking through some of her writing and it just struck me the longing for uniqueness. Just how we as human beings are so radically all over the place, nuanced,
complex,
where and certainly technology has made these things, our inventions have made certain things possible, and so it opens up more doors to really move in a longevity in a certain way. Sure. Where before you maybe couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it just reminded me of when we were talking about, you can be like.
Yeah.
I thought, man, what is the like? What can you be like? Well, there's in sexual talk, and that's what we talk about here.
Yeah.
There's many different things.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. And it's like you go, golly, like, there's just so many like ways and I don't want to say positions because that's kind of lame in a way, but there's so many like you can be with one woman, you can be with 4 women, you can have 5 this, 2 that, this there, that there.
Yep.
It just seems overwhelming.
For sure. Like we talked about decision fatigue then at some point. And then at some point will there be an honesty to say, is it ever enough? If the original longing is, am I enough? Will any of these things we put on be enough?
Right.
Or is the real issue here going back to the way the designer, laid it out? Yeah,
and just our difficulty with that.
Right.
Yeah. And like Eve, our instability.
Right.
can I really be, like, you hear like this idea in culture all the time, like, being with one person your whole life, how lame is that?
Right.
Like, who wants especially from the feminist women's side.
Okay.
It's like, who wants a sexless marriage? That's
Mm.
probably that's one of the biggest arguments probably for very pro-feminist, anti-monogamous marriage.
Okay.
That's the number one, I think, is like, a sexless marriage.
Yeah.
That you've heard forever.
Yeah.
And you think like, man, well, how much sex should someone have?
Right.
That's a question.
Yeah.
And then, like, what are we talking about? Like, what do you, like, is it better for someone just to have a hyper sexual kind of arousal all the time?
Right.
Where they want to, I hate to use vulgar kind of ideas, but like kind of hit everything that's moving, is that good?
Right.
To me, it's like a very vague argument,
Well, and it takes me, even personally, I've been in spots like that. Is it satisfying?
Yeah.
Brings me back to that. Or is it just this insatiable place? And then, so is it truly fulfilling?
Right.
To scratch that itch, or whatever, and be in that space. And, this is no longer fulfilling, so then I'm going to try this. This is no longer satisfying, so I'm going to try this. Is this just a bottomless well,
Yeah. Because at some point, no matter what decision you make with your sexual behavior, you're going to have to face the same questions.
Right.
So say you go, okay, I transition, or hey, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to homosexuality. I'm going to go this. I'm going to go that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go whatever. Polygyny. Polyamory. Whatever. But whatever you decide, at some point, the same question is going to have to be answered in your life.
Am I enough?
Yeah.
Even if it's that.
Am I enough? Is this enough?
Right.
Am I fulfilled?
Right.
Am I not? What does it feel like to be fulfilled?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that?
What does satisfaction even really mean? Truly down in that core essence of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just, are we talking about orgasm?
Right.
Like, is that what we mean?
I mean, that's pretty fleeting,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of your day, for the most part, that's not filled with an orgasm.
Right. And
so then what are we going to do?
What do we do?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, that topic of, what do I want to be? And
I think it's cool how if you take it long enough, it comes back to, what am I here for? Why do I exist?
Yeah. Those really existential questions, right?
Yeah.
That bring people back to this, probably cognitive dissonance.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Which makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
And then in order to deal with that uncomfortable feeling, we go to try to find ourselves again.
Yeah.
And
maybe mute that and say, hey, you know what? The nerve endings just need to be fired right now.
Right.
Because that's too big, too vague.
Yeah, to deal with.
Yeah.
And, it seems like a lot of us human beings, we struggle with just saying like, hey, I don't know, or I'm wrong, or, maybe this isn't the right thing. And over a course of years of your life, you realize that, life is short. And, when you're in your 50s and 60s, I would imagine, and 70s, you realize you don't have much time.
Right.
And, you have, and people, it seems like our world are always trying to deal with death.
Sure.
And the ramifications of their life. And I would imagine many people, either look in the mirror and go, and they just pride it up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing it. This is what I've chosen to be. And by golly, I've done a great job. And,
right.
And they, that kind of pride and that kind of, and we have movements today called pride. It's interesting, but we, it helps us to, as human beings, to be able to move forward with what is the inevitable.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to die.
Right.
And what was your life?
Right.
And so the idea of what you want to be, that Eve, is, thinking about here with Satan, is something that just constantly reiterates to us over and over and over, and it bothers us.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and wow, how cool. You just brought up this whole thing of, hey, we have to consider death, our imminent death, and that's exactly what Satan promised her she wouldn't have to face.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Trippy how we're like, no, let's just be right here. Let's just satisfy these. Let's go for the orgasm. Let's let maybe that, maybe there is a pushing off of, hey, it's going to be over. What will it have been worth? And that's, again, the answer in Genesis. It started there where that was his lie. You shall surely not die.
Right.
No way. You can be like God.
Right. Isn't that a trip?
Yeah.
And in the sense of, like God dictating your own thing.
Right.
Being your own judge.
Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Yeah.
Yeah, being your own sovereign.
Right.
If you will.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe that's the idea there.
Yeah.
Is being your own sovereign.
Right.
Not being accountable.
No, making your own choices, not being accountable. Whereas from a biblical worldview, we say, hey, my sexuality was designed by the Creator, and so I'm going to surrender to that, and what is the blueprint for that, and I'll wrestle with that, and I'll have to, fight through things, and, but that's where I go with it.
Yeah.
We are accountable to that.
Yes.
And
that's that takes a humbling.
Right.
Like, it's humbling to say, hey, I like pornography, but it's not right.
Right.
It's not right.
I like multiple partners.
Yeah, but it's not right. That's right. It's not the right thing to do.
And I am not God. I am not like God.
I'm not like God.
So I will go back to what he said, and I will. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have to...
Not pride.
Right.
Humility.
Right. We're learning to submit. We're learning to surrender.
Right.
We're learning to confess.
Yeah.
All these things where that cognitive dissonance is always fighting.
Yeah.
But the answer to that cognitive dissonance is all these things.
Right.
Right?
Actually, like, the peace is found through the wrestling.
Right.
Yeah.
And through that humility.
Yeah.
Of just saying, hey, this is what I want to do. And this is what maybe I've even blown it in.
Right.
This is where my struggle lies. Maybe I masturbate 10 times a day.
Sure.
Whatever it is.
Right.
But I know it's wrong. And that cognitive dissonance builds up.
Yeah.
And people get uneasy.
Right.
Like, it's like I can't deal with this God thing, this morality thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it off.
Right.
Do what you want to do. Be your own sovereign. Right? And
eat that fruit.
Eat that fruit and you feel better.
Yeah. Orgasm.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah. I threw it off the deity.
Muted that. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And really the answer is the other way.
Yeah.
The answer is going, no. It's like, the answer is coming underneath and humbling myself with God and understanding one thing about God. And that is God is long-suffering, and he's gracious and is merciful. If God wasn't gracious and merciful, then, we'd have some cognitive dissonance.
For sure.
And it would be strong.
Yeah.
Because, it's like it would be like, you're breaking a law, and you're going to the judge.
And that's it.
And that's it.
And that's it. Yeah. No, and I think I've been thinking on this week. What was the first thing God did after Eve ate the fruit, gave to Adam? After they ate the fruit, what's the first thing God did? Did he come in punishment? He said, hey, where are you? He drew near.
Isn't that cool?
Isn't that so good?
Yeah.
He wanted relationship. And that same God who walked with them in the cool of the day is the one who put on our flesh, entered humanity to say, not only am I going to draw near to you in the garden in perfection when you had me and you chose a fruit, but I'm going to come into your world. I'm going to hurt like you hurt. I'm going to long like you long. I'm going to,
Yeah. Yeah, which is really amazing. And when you have
to draw near. Yeah.
That's how we deal with that cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
of going like, oh man, I'll never be like the deity.
Right.
Because that's the cognitive dissonance. You're not measuring up
Right.
to
I
your
am
moral
not.
standards.
Right.
Right?
I am not. I cannot. Yeah.
There's only two things to do. Either you measure up to a moral standard or you change the moral standard.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And,
right. That's
and
good.
many people change the moral standard.
Right.
They just go like, oh, okay, I'm going to do what Eve did.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
I'm going to...
Surely I shall not die.
Surely I shall not die.
I'm gonna change that.
That's right. And
yeah.
you go that direction. And that's kind of, you know, the interesting thing. I think people in the church, you know, have to have a real good foundation of the grace of God and the mercy of God, because without those, you really can't deal honestly with your junk.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And as you know, dealing with an outward thing is just one thing.
Yep.
But then there's all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's within.
Yep.
You know, and how many people, like, it's interesting, like when you hear trans stories or even queer stories or homosexual stories, lesbian stories, it's always like, I didn't feel right, or I didn't feel this, or I didn't feel that, or you know, but I wonder if we all are that way.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if we all feel awkward.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I can, off the top of my head, come up with several circumstances in my life where I'm like, well, I didn't feel like whatever, doing the thing that I knew God, wanted me to do in that situation with my sexuality.
Yeah.
So yeah, we all have those places, whether it's your sexuality or something else, but we all have those places where our feelings are saying one thing that's in opposition. There's this surely you shall not die moment.
Yeah, where you're either gonna
humble yourself and submit to the accountability of Creator God, or say, hey, I'll be my own sovereign.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the time of your death will draw near.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, usually what we'll do as human beings is we'll just hold fast to our accolades.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
Thinking that that's going to help us.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea, right?
Yeah.
That if there is a deity, that we could somehow win the deity over by our accolades.
Right.
And you think of how small we are on such a small little planet in a small little universe.
And if we're all such messes, but then we're saying, you know, look at this heap of praise from all these nasty things, you know. Isn't it enough? Doesn't it look great?
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But that's how we deal with
these filthy rags, you know. Yeah.
That's how we deal with our dissonance.
Sure.
You know, that distortion that's in us that's like...
But then I think of, what does he tell us, though, to do? Come boldly before the throne of grace.
Yeah.
You know, because we do biff it all the time. We cannot be like God. We are not like God. We are not good.
Yeah.
But like you said, the Christian has to have a great understanding of grace. Come boldly before the throne of grace.
Yeah.
He put on our flesh. He drew near, very first thing in the garden, as soon as sin and death entered, you know. He's a relational God. I mean, he went to all these lengths to close the gap, you know, that we put there. It's awesome.
Check out runninglight.org to begin our 2 video series, Take Flight and Love or Lust. You can also send us questions on Twitter at Running Light or on our runninglight.org podcast page. Like us on Facebook at Running Light Ministries, Psalm 36:8. They are abundantly satisfied with the fullness of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your pleasures.